We should do like a shock horror face, like we're online, man. We're online.
We're online. Uh, we need a clapper almost as
Well,
well.
are you leading us in? We actually didn't figure this out, or is my face leading us in? We're online.
We are online, and it's the 22nd of Jan, and it's a fun time of the NBA season because All-Star votes close, and we basically are at the midway point of the season. And I think I mentioned this the other week, but we start to have a really good picture of where things are and what's going on. And we had our first big trade. The trade deadline's not for another couple of weeks, but we actually had a trade of a player that I think's been in speculation for a while. Didn't end up at the Orlando Magic like you had hoped all those recordings ago. But Pascal Siakam is officially an Indiana Pacer, and they are 0-2 in their stint with him. But obviously, there's some contextual reasons to that. Tyrese just coming back from injury, but also I would say that for the trade, I don't think this is it for Indiana. I think they have more intentions to make another move or two, and clearly this is a long-term decision. I don't know how competitive Indiana can be this season, but they're clearly trying to build something. I don't know. What were your thoughts on it?
I don't know how much this trade moves the needle for Indiana right now. It's not a bad trade in the sense from what they gave up. It's they didn't really give up any key or major players in that sense. It wasn't like an all-star for an all-star trade in that aspect. Bruce Brown is obviously a valuable player who was with the Nuggets last year with that championship run, and I think there's many suitors out there that if they're looking to move him to another destination, the Raptors will probably get some takers, I guess, in that sense. So, but look, at the end of the day, you sort of probably got it right there that the Pacers here, seventh right now in the East, even though Tyrese Halliburton is injured, they're not. They're still a piece or two away, and maybe Siakam's just one of those pieces. Yeah, maybe it's that one of those next two pieces that needs to come in here. I don't know if about you, but I don't think he's like a number two option on a championship winning team. Maybe a three. Yeah, not a number two option.
Well, where would you have ranked him on the Toronto team that did win the championship?
Well, clearly behind Lowry and Leonard.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right, so third option
third
maybe.
option.
Um, yeah,
Where
look,
would
I
you have
think
ranked him? Surely you're not ranking him ahead of Lowry or Leonard.
no, it wouldn't be ahead of Leonard, but Lowry, there might have been some competition. I think certain games he did have.
Lowry is the heart and soul of the Raptors during his prime years, man. Yeah, he was Mr. Raptor. That was the key, right? That was obviously before Fred VanVleet sort of became the All-Star and sort of prime player that he now is. But Lowry was a much more impactful player than Siakam at that point when they won the championship. I don't know how you can debate
Then I won't. It's fine.
that.
Uh, it threads into something else. Like I think in another week or two, Indiana may make another move if they're really serious about this season alone. And the reason why they may be serious about this season is obviously Siakam is a free agent at the end of the season and can walk. But I think we all collectively understand that there is clearly a deal lined up in place, already has a signature on it. They just can't date it until the off season. And it was getting me thinking as well. We all know, especially post, the decision that big free agents don't typically move teams anymore. Teams often will do one of the two. They'll either trade the guy before his contract ends, knowing that he's probably leaving, or they end up doing a contract extension to allow the player to get the maximum money, and then they end up trading him anyway. But we don't see free agents move as much, and so we can kind of assume that Pascal Siakam is going to be an Indiana Pacer next season. So how about we just remove the corruption, the tampering, whatever it may be, and just have that defined now. So if you make a trade for a player that is free agent eligible in the offseason, you can actually get that contract extension done right now. And then we kind of know, right? Because that is the weird question mark hanging over this. Will he stay? Will he won't? We know that he's going to stay. We just don't know what the money is. And it's almost like this delay of a certainty. So why not just tell us right now?
So you're basically saying that you would be voting for a rule amendment here that when a player is traded, they can be extended or signed to an additional contract at that point.
There you go. Hit it on the head. Yep,
What
cool.
but
We're in agreement.
what would be the benefit of that from, say, like the player perspective. Right now, Siakam is in a somewhat of a unique situation where he goes, all right, I'm going to a new place. I'm in my last year of the contract. Unless some sort of devastating injury occurs to him, that everyone gets scared of signing him in a sense that if he has all the options available to him right now, the Pacers have to sort of do the best thing to go, hey, you know, look after him. He likes it here. He likes what they're doing. He likes the culture. He likes the city. Otherwise, he can just put himself in free agent market and that's it. And he can go anywhere he wants. Why would you want to take that path in that sense? And at the same point, it feels like a real dicey area where you're trying to just add another loophole to the contract situation.
Well, I mean, it already exists. Like he has a deal in place. He has a certainty that Indiana will offer him big money, whether it be implicit or
The
explicit.
question
But
is, does he want it?
well, I would figure, considering it would be a surprise if he got traded and then didn't want it. I mean, I can't think of an example of a player who, of an All NBA, All Star caliber, got traded, and a team's given up a decent package to get him in return, and then he didn't resign 6 months later or 3 months later or whenever the trade actually went into effect.
How
I
about,
personally can't think of one.
how about Jimmy Butler to the Sixers?
That was a very quick, off the head, recent example. That's not bad.
Not bad, not bad. I guess you're probably right that it is a rarity. If you look at all the major trades, let's talk about all stars that were traded, that went to a new team, you would say majority of them did sign a contract with that new team. That said, there's probably a level of statistics you could research too, and we don't have that research guy right in our crew right now that pulls up stats to help us support some of these topics. But that they signed that extension, but how long do they spend at that new team? Now we're talking about players like James Harden, we're talking about players like Kyrie, and so on and so forth. So there's a fine line there between that two scenarios there, because obviously there's probably more money on the table for them with that team they're currently with versus going into the free agency market. So I guess it would be unlikely that Siakam leaves the Pacers, but it's definitely the ball's in his park, and for him to commit right now, that doesn't necessarily seem like a real key benefit for him. In fact, if you added this clause to the collective bargaining agreement, it would create a interesting situation because it'd almost be good to get traded because you could get extended prior to your contract ending. Whereas in theory, if you actually just stayed with your current team, if you stayed with the Raptors, what you're saying is that he wouldn't be able to get extended until his contract ended because obviously they did not extend him prior. You know what I mean? So it's almost like, oh, it'd be a good thing to get traded.
Yeah, well, I guess it could incentivize it a little bit more. And there's nothing obviously stopping him as well from signing an extension and then also requesting a trade in the future as well. I don't know. I just think that the contract situation in the NBA, is probably worth a bit more of a deeper dive. But, we obviously always scoff over the numbers or, we gawk over what people are getting paid. But the contracts are really short these days. Player movement is just like, every 3 years you look at the league and it's just completely different. Like you saw that Toronto infographic. That's a championship team from 5 years ago that all of them are now, on a different team in completely different directions. And I feel like if you went back 10, 20 years ago, that's not a common thing for your starting five to all be on a different team within
That's
five years.
that's a really good point, man. I actually really like where you're trending this thing too, because again, we would love some level of statistics here. Let's say take 10 years ago or 20 years ago in a different era, how many player movements were there? And I think, and I've seen an article like this again a while ago, that you're absolutely right. There's a lot less player movements. We're talking about say 20 years ago versus to like today. But I think it's got to do with um, the society how it is today. If you sort of think about people in their jobs and stuff, you're always looking for that better job, right? You're always looking for something, oh, that's a better spot to work at. You see that on social media and so on and so forth. You get to experience that. It's easy to communicate nowadays. You get all these information provided to you, whereas 20 years ago, you would not know what it looked like over there, or you would not hear that rumor or that story or that information because it would only be written in the newspapers. You'd have to go buy the newspaper and actually read it in that sort of sense. We're talking about, I guess now 30 years ago, really, but in that sort of era, way back then. So, and I guess that's a byproduct of these superstars, yeah, these superstar athletes that they're falling exactly in the same category as many, common people that, hey, look, I'm here a couple of years, bang, where else can I go? Is that better? Can I get more money? Do I get a better parking spot? Is my office nicer? These are all things that people now think about more.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation because we've talked in the past about players being conscious of their legacy, but even even role players or even players who maybe exceed um, a position for a period of time, there is that power leverage, to, well, I'm going to make the best situation for myself, and just a general level of education. You can't get away with being a bad franchise anymore, so to speak, because you look at Detroit, for example, and it's like everyone around the league would be very conscious of what's going on in Detroit. What we get publicly is not even probably as much as players get privately. And so, if you've got a friend on Detroit currently and you're sending them messages, try to gauge what the business is, you're getting really good insight. But then also moving forward, you almost wonder if it's spilling into bad franchises are going to stay bad too, because it's kind of hard to shake that cultural image. And I think we talked about Detroit's culture as well. What is the incentive over the next 5 years for anybody to want to sign there? Because Cade isn't panning out, so that's not a sales pitch that you want. And they're bad and they're getting worse, and they've been bad and now they're actually worse than they ever before. So,
Well,
yeah, look,
it's not just
interesting.
culture, man. I think the level of big market cities and locations. Miami obviously has got the nice weather, and Orlando in that sort of sense. Some of those other teams in those warmer climates. Other places are much more smaller markets, a lot less nightlife. It depends again on your personality. That's the reality, isn't it? But if you were drafted or in a team where you're in the market that's just not really a cup of tea outside of your work hours, then you sort of have some level of inkling to want to go, oh, can I go to a sort of a major city and play in that sort of, audience?
Yeah, yeah. I think we won't labor the point of major versus minor, but um, I guess talking about different cities as well. So I'm a little bit inspired by this take, or at least discussion, because we had two really good back-to-back games with the Denver Nuggets going into Philadelphia and then Boston, respectively, and having really good powerhouse, best of the West, best of the East matchups. Both of the games being quite high quality, all the superstars kind of showing up doing their thing. The games being really close. And it got me thinking, wow, it's so nice that the West can come over to the East and make it a little bit more competitive, because we're all aware that the East is struggling this season. It's just not the same caliber of, you know, the bell curve. And that will be the only time that Denver goes over there. They will only go over there once. So I know that they'll get visited at least once. But East and West will only play each other twice in a season. Yeah, we understand that might be because of travel, logistics, etc. But we also know that, like, how many times have we seen Milwaukee and Indiana? 4 times, 5 times now. Like we've
Yeah, but they're
seen,
divisional rivals, so
they
that's
are
like you play
divisional
each other four
rivals.
times, isn't that correct?
So what I'm proposing, because I'm always proposing something, because everything should change every single moment of every single day.
Huh.
Um, what if we just mellowed it out a little bit? Let's stop having the East teams play each other and actually have the West teams come over one more time during a season, and then the East team goes over one more time. So, you know, when you look, I don't know if you've ever seen a map as well.
Yep.
The West spans from Portland, I believe, as being like the top left team, all the way over to, is it New Orleans? Is New Orleans or Memphis? Like one of those two teams is like as far
Now you're
east as
asking me
possible.
about American geography, man.
Yeah, I mean that's not a hard question, is it? So it's it's just an interesting concept that we're going to have all these high caliber teams that could end up in the finals, and they're only going to potentially play each other once a season. And we've talked in the past about when players rest or if players are injured, that city misses out on seeing them for the season. um, I'm surprised that in the modern era, with transport being better, with scheduling being more adjusted for back to backs, etc., how come we can't get a couple more East things? Or even just if Denver goes over to Boston, they just play 2 games in a short period of time against Boston, so that the Americans get a win.
I love this take because you're sort of opening a can of worms on all these things, man. You used the sentence there, used the phrase, transport is now better today, yeah? And I'm sort of like, my first thought was like, all right, sure. I don't know how many years ago, I'm sure they caught buses around and blah, 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 right? Yeah, but I'm sure nowadays, all right, every team flies from city to city. They they have the most efficient way of transport to get from A to B in, 9 out of 10 times, I'd imagine, right? 99% of the time, I'd imagine. The catch here is that I don't know, again, we need this facts guy there. Do planes fly faster nowadays? Can we actually get from city A to city B faster than you used to be able to do that 10 years or 20 years ago? Like, I don't think so because they ain't moving any closer together. Yeah, all right. And it's not like that interchange was built so you could drive around that city and save yourself 25 minutes on the road. Yeah, so I just don't feel that there's a huge change in the reality that city A is here, city B is over here. Okay, and that the fact that minimizing travel due to conferences and obviously divisions is the whole idea of what why they were created in the first place, especially from that sort of logistics point of view. And I think last week we were talking about traveling and resting. I think players rest times and being able to get enough time between games and so on and so forth. At this point, man, your season's going 350 days of the year, and your off season's 2 weeks, right? It's like I don't know, man. I guess that's sort of how your take sort of to me came across now.
Well, maybe one, I'm not trying to say that planes fly faster, per annum. It's just more the consciousness, the comfort, the technology and science that's went into managing professional athletes. But in terms of the season point, like it's been a running thing. Does the season need to be shorter? Obviously, it has implications for NBA history, etc. Becomes really problematic in that sense. But if you had a shorter season, then you can facilitate those additional days off. But again, and what I'm suggesting, Denver went over to the East, and it's probably, I think they played 5 games in 7 nights or 5 games in 8 nights. Like they play a lot. Why can't those 5 games be against the same team and they just do one more Eastern trip later in the season to get that cluster of teams going? Or, maybe there's even dynamic scheduling. I don't know. Like, again, very difficult to pull off. But it's going to be pulled off in wake of the Golden State situation where they've postponed some games. But almost doing dynamic scheduling where, well, who are the best teams, and let's actually have them play each other. Because I don't know how many times an Eastern team can watch Washington versus Detroit, because they're going to play each other more than Denver plays Denver plays Philadelphia, or Denver plays Celtics.
I'm not sure how much watchable TV there is, how many more games you can get against either Washington or the Pistons anyway in general, right? Whichever team's playing them. So, okay, I think your fixture's going to change anyway when they get to 32 teams. Isn't that on the horizon in the sense where they're looking to add a couple more cities? What is it? I think Las Vegas is on the list of options there, and some other key cities as well that are being considered whenever that happens. But I'm going to imagine that's probably within the next 5 to 10 years. But look, I guess that's anyone's money right now. That's not in the inner circle for the NBA's planning, I guess. But yeah, look, so I'm sure the fixture will change in that sense. But on that sort of note, man, with the fixturing here, I was pulling out standings, all right, and your favorite team right now, all right, is in an interesting spot, man. Let me just pull up. All right, so you guys are 7th right now. You're in the play-in. You're in the play-in, man. 24-18. You're over 500 now, 6 games, but you're not even in the playoffs right now. You're gonna play the play-in, and I guess the question here is that are the Suns contenders this year? Yeah, and now you're gonna go, oh man, Suns bias. Of course they are. Yeah, we're just getting warmed up, right? But you have been getting warmed up for a while. And sure, you can allude to, Bradley Beal, Zinni injured, and KD missed a couple games, and Booker's been done his usual missing games here and there. But I'm not utterly convinced, and I'm not a Suns fan, so, you can sway me some other way perhaps, that you guys are actually contenders like you guys thought you were at the start of the year.
Currently, we're on a 5-game win streak, and the big 3 have actually been present in playing games. We, personally, I feel like we need to play until All-Star break, and we need to see where this settles before we can make any definitive statements. The hardest part with Phoenix is we're a little bit small. We are relying on Yusuf Nurkic to maintain his good health, which he's he's done a good job so far. Otherwise, we get real small real quick, and we don't have any flexibility for roster changes, right? So what we have is what we have. We can't do anything else. As a Suns fan, it doesn't make sense to say it because everyone would probably argue against it, but I feel very disappointed with Devin Booker. Perhaps my expectation of him was too high, but his erratic performances his style of play. You know, they want him to be point booker. It's probably not working to the like crazy, let's write articles about the revolution that's happening in Phoenix level that I was anticipating. They're all good. They're all playing very well. Kevin Durant's probably overperforming for what he should be in this role. Um, but I guess the beauty of the NBA season is that once the playoffs begin and Phoenix are in, they have to win 4 games against whichever team that they're placed against. Now, I'm still overly confident that their 2 games that they had against Denver, in which it was just pure offensive firepower, is replicable, right? I'm not saying that they have to get hot for 16 games in a row, but they're going to go up against a team in the first round that theoretically they'll be better than and
Let's
should
say
be able to
US
win.
finished seventh. Yeah, right now you'd be playing the
Hmm.
Thunder. They're second in the West.
Hmm.
Do
Well,
you
the
do?
one thing that works against the Thunder is youth, right? So we know that the Thunder is really good. We know that Shea is popping off, but I think people are forgetting as well. You know, the 2 top teams right now in the West were playing teams last season,
Mm, mm.
so they're taking a huge jump right now. It's 2 young teams taking a massive jump. We have seen this in the past. Maybe they win the first round. Maybe they don't. You have to cut your teeth somewhere. Sacramento was a good team who finally made the playoffs, and they lost in the first round to a more veteran squad. Is Phoenix a more veteran squad? Well, I guess you have to look at the squad, no, but the
Mm.
individuals, yes. Kevin Durant's
True,
a
true.
finals MVP. Booker's been to the finals as well. And
Yep.
even Beal has been to the second round of the playoffs. And that's not including some of the players on the roster as well. So the regular season is going to set up these teams pretty well. But you also look at the standings, and there isn't a lot between seventh and first, because if things continue to trend the way that they are for Phoenix, and Timberwolves drop a couple of games, OKC drops a couple of games, it shuffles the standings, and in a week's time, we're having a different conversation. So I'm not gun ho, right? If we were first in the West and we had like the highest offensive rating, we had a top 10 defense, I'd be very confident to say
Mm.
I'm so excited for us to win the NBA championship. We're still in it, which is better than some teams can be saying at this point, but um, it just for me it needs a little bit more time. This last win streak is nice, but I would like to see almost us go like 15-3 or
And you're
something in
you're
this.
hoping that your 3 superstars here stay healthy for these 40 games or so left, right? That's the key
Well,
catch as
that's
well.
that's that's what the Clippers are hoping for. That's what the Pelicans are hoping for. That's what the Mavericks are hoping for. Like
But
there are a
you
lot
guys
of
definitely fall
teams
in that category
making
where
it.
you're hoping for something, though, isn't it? That's the key, and it's a hope that's quite critical to your success, because you lose one of these guys, you lose KD, you lose Booker. All right, suddenly your projection does drop somewhat, quite significantly. It's not something that, oh well, that's okay. Yeah.
I think I don't know if we've talked about it or if I've just heard it being talked about, but any of the teams in the top, if they lose their first or second best player, it is it is critical, right? If you look at the Timberwolves and they lost, say, Rudy Gobert, who a lot of people might not identify as the top player, but losing him would just change their defense immensely. Thunder losing SGA is a different team. Nuggets not having Jamal Murray in the playoffs probably hurts their chances, even though it's not Jokic going down. Clippers, Kawhi doesn't appear, Paul George doesn't appear. That team looks different. Kings, if Sabonis or De'Aaron Fox go down, it's not good. Lakers, if AD goes down or LeBron goes down, no good. Pelicans, if Zion, Ingram, like every team is hinging a lot of their hopes on the first or second. Are the role players around Phoenix very good? I mean, Grayson Allen's for some reason having a career year, and he's been a revelation. And Yusuf Nurkic has been able to play pretty much 40 games,
Mm,
which has not
mm.
been something he's been able to do for a long period of time. Um, but yeah, I think for the West, as I said, I'm looking at the standings currently, and that there's 4 losses in between us and the Lakers, and then there is 2 losses in between. Sorry, 6 losses in between us and the Timberwolves. These are still small margins considering that there's a half a season to go. So
So give it more time.
Yeah,
Give it more time, man.
no more time. I'm not hitting the panic button, nor am I hitting the celebration button. I'm
So
keeping my hands off the buttons.
on the give it more time, man. I brought up a box score while we're talking today. It was a game that was completed, I think, today. Which when I looked at the box scores as part of fantasy, I don't know about you, man. I'm sure you look at box score, right, so you know who to pick up or not. Any good fantasy manager surely does look at them some capacity. So, and the game I pulled up here is the Bucks versus Pistons game, yeah. All right, and it was a fairly high scoring game, 141 to 135 for the Bucks. But when I was looking at the box scores, it was a really interesting situation. Let me just read out some of what I'm trying to illustrate here. Okay, the starters for the Pistons. Okay, Bogdanovic, Knox, Duran, Jaden Ivey. Okay, and Killian Hayes. I don't know why the hell this kid's still starting. Okay, but they were all minus double digits in the box score, right? Anywhere from Bogdanovic minus 29 to Jaden Ivey minus 15, yeah? And this is a 6 point game, okay? 6 point game at the end, okay? The final score. Because all five key players that came off the bench, which now includes players like Gallinari, Mike Muscala, yeah, that came over in that trade, and Alex Burks as a vet sort of thing, were all plus in the plus minus in that situation, including like Alex Burks was plus 24, Gallinari is plus 20, and this is a guy that everyone sort of forgets about, right? But he's had his injuries and he's now old, I guess, right? Just got traded, yeah, but he was plus 20 in 16 minutes of play, even though he only got 8 points and one rebound. Okay, he was plus 20 in the 16 minutes of play, versus on the other side of things where like Killian Hayes played 18 minutes was minus 19, yeah, and Kevin Knox played 16 minutes was minus 22. Yeah, every minute you're standing on the floor, your team's going down an extra point here, which sort of leads to an interesting aspect of coaching. And you've been a coach before, right? And I'm a coach, obviously. When you have this data, because at these high level games, yeah, do you always have this information? Yeah, at a low level, junior level, you don't. Yeah, you sort of have to use your observations and process it in the mind. This player's going well, that player's not going so well. All right, let's assume here like the Pistons are trying to win. Yeah, because it doesn't matter where they finish in the top lowest three. Now you get your flatten lottery odds anyway. Yeah, in part that's why they traded for vets. Right? They looked at their salary situation. All right, and it was a decision they made there from that point of view. But at some point, surely you go, I'm trying to win here. We haven't won that many games. That would be great for morale. Okay, it doesn't matter. We're still surely going to finish with one of the bottom three records in the league anyway. That when a kid's on the floor and he's bleeding points, yeah, a player's on the floor, he's bleeding points, you put on someone else. And I'm just sort of shocked that this was a real interesting aspect of why are some of these players still staying on playing these many minutes when they're clearly getting killed when they're on the floor.
That game is actually one I had thought about running it through a discussion because I don't know if that game says as much about plus minus or the good players on Detroit as it does about Milwaukee because that game was, easy for the taglines to say Dame time's back. He had 42 points and 15 assists, and Giannis played really well. They just beat the worst team in the NBA by 6 points. And not only did they just beat them by 6 points, but they also gave up 135 points. And I think that win is a little bit tarnished because winning by 6 points, that can happen against a bad team. But winning by 6 points when you allowed 135 points against you is an indictment of your defense. And we saw them go down to the Cavs, a good team in the playoff hunt, in about a similar fashion. They allowed 145 points. Detroit is going to have some inflated plus minus when you have an explosion offensive game like that. Personally, I think it says more about the Bucks and their defensive woes, and something's wrong in Buckland. And I know that their record and their current standing and their talent doesn't make you want to hit the panic button, but their record isn't too dissimilar to Phoenix. The only reason why we worry about Phoenix is they're seventh, and we don't worry about the Bucks because they're second. But the reality is the win-losses are very similar. In fact, the defense on the Bucks side is worse.
Well, the Bucks just doing what the Suns were setting out to do here, just score 140 points a game, and just that would be more than the other team scored, so you win. So that was the whole concept that you pitched, was it not?
Maybe. but we kind of know that that's not going to hold up in the playoffs. And at least the Phoenix Suns did hire a defensive-minded coach with some intent of maybe, addressing that issue.
So at the end of the day, coming back to this plus minus, are you saying plus minus is not a relevant factor to consider during the moments of a game to make decisions on personnel while you're in the
Not
game
within a
to get a
game.
W?
Not not within a game
Why
because I
not?
think because sometimes a game can just have okay. So for example, let's say five of us are on the court at the exact same time, and Steph Curry comes down and he hits five half court threes in a row with
Sure.
a hand in his face.
Yep.
That means that we're all now
Minus
and then
16. Gotcha.
we go down the
Yep.
court, and we're only able to score on three layups,
Okay.
right? So he hits five threes, we
So
hit
we're
three
minus
layups. So
nine.
that's
Gotcha.
right. So we're -9, right? That is on. If you looked at it post game, I didn't watch the highlights, I didn't watch the game. I just looked at the box score. Oh wow, like Fauzi played for 3 minutes in the second quarter and he was a -9. What went wrong? And it's like, then you have to investigate further to assess, okay, well, Steph Curry hit five unbelievable shots. That's not fair. And sometimes plus minus hurts players. Like any piece of data, there's validity. It is how you dissect it. But I also think that some plus minus is a beneficiary of certain circumstances. For example,
Whoa.
anyone who's on the
What do you mean?
court,
There's nothing more black and white than plus minus. I think that's the thing with
if
numbers and math, right? One plus one is two, right? There's nothing. You
no,
can't
because
debate that. It
it's
is what
not
it is.
because it's when you're on the court, how much does your team score versus how much do they score?
Yeah.
There are players in the NBA who might just get some cardio and then have a +20 at the end of the game because they just were lucky when the team went hot. When Phoenix went on their 28 point thing, that completely fluctuated the plus minus on that. Now, would you say everyone who was trying to close the game on Phoenix and Sacramento, respectively, are the greatest and worst defensive players or offensive
Not,
players?
but
No,
that,
you would say momentum played a huge component in that.
but during the course of momentum, surely that the plus minus justifies making some personnel changes. Yeah, I think, and look, we don't have a breakdown of this game specifically. We're going to explore this one much more in depth. You could break it down from specifically this game, like over that 48 minutes, yeah. But let's just look at an over snapshot here. If your player's on the floor for 20 minutes and your minus 20, to me, that player should be on the floor less. Yeah, is that not a logical thought there? All right, because this guy is not doing your team any good, yeah, and we all have those bad days, right? So maybe sure, start him again next game. It's not the end of the world, all right. Maybe he's just having a bad day, but if you're trying to get that W, all right, and you have that data with you, which you surely do, yeah, throughout the course of the game here, yeah, throughout quarter times and throughout timeouts that your personnel, your coaching staff has access to, that can assist you in making those decisions. And I'm saying that should be a much more important part, especially at high level basketball, of being able to make personnel changes. And I don't know, look, again, we know we're not in that sort of coaching circle in that sense, but surely you could utilize that to your advantage.
I personally think eye test would tell you that, and I think plus minus sometimes is more indicative of lineup combinations. So there are games where, so for example, Scoot Henderson has one of the worst plus minus net ratings in NBA history with -56 when they lost to OKC. Now, is that his fault or is that Portland's fault? And then also, he only got that because Chauncey was playing him for as long. And admittedly, he probably played him in a game like that because, well, you're here to learn, so you might as well learn anyway. But he's going to go down as one of the worst plus minuses ever. So I think that it has validity. Maybe you need a bigger game sample to really assess those kind of things. But again, a big game sample, like if Scoot goes into his next game and is a +30, he's still a -26 across his last two games. Like sometimes those huge outliers, and maybe the analysts already do this and I'm overthinking it, but the analysts need to kind of track that. And maybe there is that data that's tracked as there. So I think plus minus has validity, but I think like you alluded to in a social capacity or even a local capacity, your eyes do a lot of the telling as well. You kind of know which players aren't giving the right energy, or this combination of players isn't working, or it's not their night because they're being targeted. I don't think you need a plus minus box score to come along for you to then make a decision. Maybe it would validate a decision, but I don't think it's going to highlight anything there.
Well, staying on the coaching sort of topic here, man. I said I wanted to talk about Mike Brown, man. We had about probably about a week ago now, where Mike Brown came out, had some comments to make about the refereeing, brought his laptop out, generated a whole round of new memes, no doubt, that that part of the NBA sort of growing collection of memes, because he was not happy, right? Then he copped himself a $50,000 fine, right? Which is quite steep actually. Usually I think it's 25K, right? And then he copped himself. I think he's had a few infractions in the past too, right? So he copped himself 50,000 there. And my thought here was that surely, yeah. If I'm an NBA head coach, yeah, you're an NBA head coach, yeah, and I think the Raptors head coach recently got a fine too, and this happens all the time, yeah. Every week, man, surely some coach cops a fine on average because they have criticism about the refereeing in a game. Surely you could communicate this in the media in a much more, let's call it reverse, approach to not cop a fine, like something like, wow, today, you know what? I actually have zero complaints with the referees. They were wonderful. They made all the right calls for the other team. In fact, it was great that the other team only shot 4 free throws. Of course, 40 free throws, because that was an absolutely correct case, because we played so terribly that we fouled them on everyone, and the referees had such sharp eyes, and they caught every single call. I can't be more blessed to be in the best league in the world. Now, does that cost me a $25,000 fine? I don't know, man. What are your thoughts? Surely there are more creative ways than to throw your money away.
Well, this is where this stat man that doesn't exist would come in handy right now, because I feel like Greg Popovich probably would be the prime candidate for a sarcastic response that
But
everyone
why,
picks
why is
up what
not
he's
more
saying.
coaches taking the board? Stop giving your money away.
I mean, look, I don't know how those fines work specifically, but surely, you know, sometimes we acknowledge that coaches get texts to fire up their players. It's
Sure,
a culture
absolutely,
thing. Go to bat for your players.
absolutely.
The Raptors coach, for example, um, I don't know if you're aware, but they played the Clippers the night after, and there was a huge spike in their free throws comparatively to the Lakers game. And did he have an impact on that? Who knows? But there's been, remember
Well, let's take
the
that first step, man. I do not believe if this is an unbiased league and an unbiased refereeing, which that's a whole other can of worms, right? But we're all humans and we make mistakes and blah 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 as referees too. But if this is an unbiased league, there should be no influence from game to game. There should be no influence because this week that coach said something about the refereeing. So this game we're going to try a little bit harder to make sure we don't miss these calls, and then somehow that reflected in that game, and maybe more fouls were called for that team. It just doesn't make any sense, man.
That's an interesting take, because you almost want referees to be robots. So, I'm thinking back to the days that I used to referee. And if you were a player who I had refereed in the past and you had been incredibly vocal or you had been incredibly confrontational,
Yep,
etc.,
yep.
I am approaching you in a new game in a completely objective sense
But
with that prior
unbiased.
knowledge.
But unbiased. See, you still have to. It's still it should
No,
be.
but
It
this is the
should be
thing.
an unbiased point of view based upon
Okay,
the
so
situation of the game. Yeah, I know you know me last
no,
time. Like you
no, no,
gave me
no,
a check,
no.
I got in your face, whatever. Yeah,
Basketball is all like basketball refereeing is about management of the game. It's not about calling everything exactly the same every game. So, the easiest one is sometimes there is contact that you let go so that the other team can have a fast break layup, for example, right? And then there's deliberate intent to stop it. And that's not always a consistent call. Sometimes contact in the key does get called, doesn't get called, the jumping fouls, etc.
So
What
is
I'm
that
trying
is
to
that
say
called
is
being missed, or is that a decision
no,
that you're not making that call as a referee? Now you're
it's a
going back.
combination of things. It's a combination of sometimes you do legitimately miss a call. Sometimes you make a judgment to not call something and it has a bigger impact on the player than you intended, but you didn't call it for a reason. Sometimes you overcall things because you're conscious of trying to manage the game. I refereed games and I would be able to keep my whistle pretty much in my mouth and not have to blow it too often. And the game would run really smoothly because the players, that was the flow of the game. And then in other games, I had to put both teams in the penalty in both halves because that was how the game needed to be managed. So, in reference to this, these coaches go on this rant. And then the next game, the league is going to basically word up the referees. All the referees are going to be conscious of this, of hey, he's just come off a massive rant being annoyed at the referees for this specific thing. We, whether or not we're doing it consciously or subconsciously, it's in our mind. We're aware of it, right? And it's the same impact that you have on players as well. When you give a player two quick fouls, Well, why don't you just tell them to be objective about it? Like, well, you still got 4 more. So, like, what are you worried about? You might not get any more fouls for the rest of the game. What's the big deal that you got 2 quick fouls? This is where the human element comes into it. You can't turn that off.
So when the when the coaches pine about referees, come on, man, be consistent. Yeah, you call that for that end, but you didn't call this with that other end. Blah blah blah. You alluded to at the start there that you basically said that it's not about being consistent. Like this end, that happened, that end, that didn't happen, but you're making some other decision in your head because that coach doesn't complain so much, so I'll let that one play. And but this coach complains more.
No.
Like
I think
what?
maybe you're misinterpreting. It's I don't favor. You're not trying to favor. What I'm trying to say is, if you go for a layup and you make your dribble from the 3-point line, and the defender's a little bit slow and accidentally hip checks you, right? But you hold onto your balance and you have an open lane for 2 points. I have 2 choices in that thing. I can call it by the book and say, well, they fouled you in a defensive possession and the basket is cancelled because you were still dribbling from the 3-point line. So you lose your 2 points, but you get your foul. Some people would say, cool. Like that means that it puts them in the bonus later on. It puts that guy in foul trouble. Some people will be like, hey, I want my 2 points. I just got my 2 points. Another time, someone might hip check you and it allows a help defense to slide across. And you could make a judgment and say, well, that hip check delayed the offensive play and allowed the defense to get in position. I need to call that. And what I'm articulating are snap decisions that you kind of make. So you are reading the game and you're trying to analyze what is going to be a good for the flow, but also make sure it rewards good offense or good defense respectively. I hope that example kind of helped a little bit as to why you would or wouldn't call the exact same foul.
I feel you could have assembled some supporting video footage as well, but but at the end of the day, going back to that initial point though, yeah, referees and coaches are never going to see eye to eye. Yeah, that's going to go down for 1,000 years more. That you're just not going to go see eye to eye because it's just the nature of sport. Okay, but at the end of the day, surely Mike Brown, surely other coaches, not just Greg Popovich, can deliver their message and their support of their players and air their frustrations using a position and terminology and words in a different way that is not construed as criticism that then costs them money. No, I don't know.
I think it would be interpreted as sarcasm. I think.
What does that cost you a fine too? If you're overly praising the referees during your media session after the game, do you get a fine for that too? I haven't heard that one happen.
Look, that's what is your intent? I'd be analyzing your intent of why you're saying this. You just lost the game and you come out praising. I don't.
What's wrong with that?
I don't think, you haven't. No, you haven't found the loophole. I don't think you found the loophole. You think you have.
Oh, I don't know, man. I think someone needs to try it. Yeah, maybe someone one day will try it, and surely at the very least, we're gonna get a viral video clip, man. and yeah. Look, I don't know. I think it's just worth approaching some of these things because clearly there's obligations with the media to sort of share your thoughts post game and whatnot. And if you come out and say the refs are shit and the refs are bad, yeah, you're gonna cop a fine. Yeah, in any capacity that you sort of phrase that. So if you've got something to say about the referees, you just got to say it some different way. You got to take it from a different approach, from a different viewpoint, and use some different words to express your frustration. All right, even if it's still there. That's all I'm saying here, man. But look, but from frustration, man, my week this week for Fantasyland was not too frustrating, man. How about you, man? What's going on? 5-4. You doing 5-4 the rest of this season, yeah?
I think the injury bugs finally come for my team. I was doing all right for a good while, and then the injury bug came. So Tyrese did make a return, which was really exciting. Probably a bit more surprising than I would have envisioned. I don't think it was 2 weeks since his injury. I think it was only about a week and a bit. And he played really well, 21 and 17, and actually had really solid shooting. So I'm excited to see how his stats come back. And it also probably highlighted how important he is to my team because my assists, were a lot more competitive these last 2 weeks than they usually are. Normally, I kind of guarantee that as a category win. Luka has been a little bit up and down with his games played, but admittedly, he could have played a game and it was postponed due to the unfortunate passing of the Warriors assistant coach. So sometimes these are just the ebbs and flows of the NBA season. So I'm not too stressed. I guess currently what I'm banking on is I need to figure out the right squad for the playoffs because I'm pretty confident that I will continue at worst getting five and fours and head into the playoffs, right? And so I've got Evan Mobley stashed on my injury reserve. He's coming back in February.
Mm,
That's
mm.
going to allow me to probably drop Aaron Gordon, which, as time goes on, you'll be like, oh, is that why you picked him up? Yeah, maybe. Do I make any other moves as well? I'm always in the business of looking at things because it'd be wrong not to. But it also just depends on how the season plays out. When we play our playoffs, I believe it's around that late March, April setting,
Mm,
and
mm.
NBA teams do some interesting things with their NBA stars based on playoff seedings and award races, respectively. So, all of us right now might have a really bad squad in April, and we might need to pivot, or maybe because of how close the standings get, having a Western squad, for example, is going to be more beneficial than an Eastern squad. So, um, it is exciting to see you kind of climb the rankings. You were so vocal about all the issues of the league, and now it's good that you're having success in it. You don't need to
Oh, I'm not even
don't need
part.
to.
Let's be clear. I'm not even part of the groups to be vocal or not vocal anymore. I've gone
Hmm.
down a different route there. But
Yep.
obviously, I used the clear logic here. I was probably about 15, I think 13 to 15 games out of second spot a handful of weeks ago, man. And I was like at the point where, hey, look, if I do nothing here, I'm just going to continue to go down these standings. Yeah, I clearly needed some changes. So, as you already know, man, I shook a whole bunch of things up. Got rid of Luca. You ended up with him. And if you actually look at everyone that I shifted, man, Siakam's gone, Lillard's gone, Zion's gone, Kyrie got dropped, you grabbed him too. I've really turned over, I don't know, 75% of my roster for one reason or another, with a real clear focus on some areas which were weaknesses for me in the first opening weeks. And I guess, look, it's starting to pay off. I'm actually not last anymore, and still plenty of time still to still continue to just move up these standings a little bit more. Fingers crossed about injuries, obviously, like any team, no doubt. But I guess I got a lot less reliance on a player like Luca, as you're discovering a little bit now. Like, oh damn, if he's out at the moment or in and out, or even like Tyrese Halliburton or the owners that had Embiid and stuff like that. You do miss them. You do miss them when they're out for a week or whatnot, week and a half, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, what other options do I have? So, but I guess maybe we should really touch upon the wrap up to this week. We had an interesting trade discussion this week, yeah, and it was a bit of a parallel universe in an opposite way, right? Because these were the same players that traded in real life, wasn't it?
Hmm.
We talked about Domantas Sabonis, which I've got obviously, and you got Tyrese Halliburton, and you made me a trade offer. I think that was sort of counter to something that I offered you. I don't know. I guess firstly, I'm curious. Firstly, if this trade is still open from your end, all right. But secondly, I was looking at the stats here, man, and I'm like, why would I actually pull this trade off? You're getting a better player.
Well, you're getting no, 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 no. So I think definitely there's a consciousness on my team. My rebounding is a weak point, and Sabonis is the league leader in rebounds.
Yeah,
And
so
then
what would I give him up? What would I give him up then?
well,
Because you
you
got the league
already
leader
have
in assists, I
rebounds.
guess, right? I guess that's a
Well,
valid argument.
that's my selling point, right? Is that I'm giving you the league leader in assists, and also his stock right now, especially when we were discussing it. I didn't know how he would return post injury. I don't know when he would return post injury. So you were banking on potential where I was getting a known commodity. Well, now he's back, and he's back with a new running mate, and there'll be a little bit of a teething period for them to settle in. But it will be quite exciting to see how his stats change because he was already doing 25 and 12 on really good shooting splits with the Indiana squad from before, and now he has an All-Star, All-NBA teammate who, here's some fun facts as well. Indiana, really good team on the fast break. Pascal Siakam, really good on the fast break, and you wouldn't pick it, but stats would tell you that he's actually like the league leader in fast break points. And we've just joined these two players together. I'm really curious to see if the assist numbers take a little bit of a spike,
You think
or
Tyrese is
even
going
the
to throw
field
even
goal.
more assists in the game now because he's got Siakam? Is that what you're trying to say?
Potentially.
You're trying to
Yeah,
sell me here?
potentially. Yeah.
I,
Maybe
I
he
guess, look,
shoots a bit
at the
better
end of the
because there's
day,
another player on the court.
would this be a simple enough evaluation of these two players? Right? If we were to make such a swap, okay, that They both score a few points. Yeah, maybe Halliburton scores a bit more. He's obviously a better passer. Sabonis is a better rebounder. But let's be clear, Sabonis is not a sneeze at passing the ball. Right? I think he's averaging about 7 assists a game. He gets triple doubles. Yeah, he gets double digits assists too. All right. Neither player really block or steals, make that many steals. Maybe Harris Halliburton has a slightly better there. And Sabonis is not great necessarily at the free throw line. Yeah, there's probably some little things there. So it's to me, it was a real like when you make a trade because there's a logic to it why it's making your team better. But I was looking at this trade and I was like, I really like Halliburton. I would trade for him. But you want a bonus, which is understandable. Okay, you're not going to give it up for a trade that makes your team worse. But to me, this feels like a trade where we're just trading players that do slightly different things, have equivalent sort of impact on your teams in different areas, and at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily make my team and maybe not necessarily your team any better anyway. And it's just we're doing a trade for the sake of doing a trade. That's what it sort of brought down to. That's why I didn't really come back and talk about it more with you since we talked about it that day. And at the end of the day, if you need rebounding, man, surely there's free agents out there on the waiver line there that you could pick up for more rebounds. So just go grab them, man. Clearly not Aaron Gordon because he just grabs like 5 rebounds a game. Like there's players out there averaging because we got such a small league that 8, 9 rebounds a game that's still available.
Okay. All right.
You're
It's
like,
good to
oh,
know
bang,
what
bang,
you.
this afternoon, this evening, you're bang. I see you've added Marvin Bagley Jr.
No. Look, I think as I said to you before, I have enough of a lead in the standings that I probably will be in the playoffs. That's quite easy, and
Yeah,
I'm
your
not going
conference
to.
sucks, man. They don't even give you a run.
I don't think I'm benefiting from that. I think that's just how it's gonna play out. So
Until next week, then.